back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we will be studying Joshua chapter 6. Joshua chapter 6 is about the Fall of Jericho. It's a very famous story. It's one that's taught in our Bible classes, even to the very young, although it is undoubtedly the fact that a lot of the details get left out of it. I know they did when I was growing up, and rightfully so. There's some pretty hard things to study in here, some things that give people pause when studying the Bible and trying to understand how a good and gracious God could call for these things. But they do indeed happen. So we need to deal with them as they come up and not just kind of sweep them under the rug type thing. So let's get into the study and see what happens here. First of all, it's important to understand that this is indeed war, and in war things are terrible. But when we're dealing with the wickedness of man and God's judgment against them, then the wrath of God, the judgment of God, is going to be equal to the wickedness of man, in the sense of if they are wholly wicked, then his justice is going to be wholly powerful as well, in order to eradicate that from the earth. And we see this in the flood. We see that the wickedness of man was complete, that every thought and intent of his heart was wicked. And here we are in the promised land, and these people are the same way in the way that they're proceeding in their everyday lives. Their every thought and intent is wicked. And God promised to Abraham that he would receive this land, but he didn't give it to him at that time, because the wickedness of these people was not full up. The Bible says that in the book of Genesis, that the wickedness of the land of Palestine, or the wickedness of this land that he was going to give to Abraham's descendants, was not full up yet. And now it is, and so God is bringing his judgment, and the tool of that judgment is not a flood, because he had promised that he would never do that again with water, but instead he is bringing the Israelites in and doing that. And the really big part about this is the teaching that this is supposed to give to the Israelite people, for when their purpose is fulfilled, how are they acting? And if they are acting like these nations that they are going in to conquer, if they are acting like all of the nations around them that God brings judgment to, they are going to face the same end. And they do indeed. They don't learn the lesson. They do indeed face that same end, and it is horrible, and it is very destructive, and their children are involved in a powerful way that is not good from the perspective of the conquered people. And so keep those things in mind as we read through Joshua chapter 6, and indeed through the rest of the book of Joshua. Alright, verse 1, it says, "Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in." Now again, we've already seen how afraid these people are of the Israelites. And these guys are so fearful that they've seen the Israelites camping outside, and they've closed up all their gates. Nobody gets to go in or out. They're terrified right now of the Israelite people, and they have every right to be, because they know that God is with them. And Jehovah said unto Joshua, "See, I have given into your hand Jericho, the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor." So Jericho is a city-state. They are their own nation, if you will, and the king of it has shut up the city. He is terrified of these people, and God says, "See, look, they're scared. They know that I've already given you this town. They know that I've given you this victory." And kind of a way God is saying, look, if they can see it, you obviously have to see it as well. And so he says, he gives them instruction. He says, "And you shall compass the city, all you men of war, and go around about the city once. Thus shall you do 6 days." So God's first instruction is all the men of war would go around the city one time, and they were going to do that once a day for 6 days. Then verse 4 says, "And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horn, and on the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets." So as they're marching around once a day, men with trumpets are going to go, and they're going to go before the Ark of the Covenant. And all of that is going to go around once per day for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, they're going to go around 7 times. They're going to march around the city 7 times while the priests are blowing with their trumpets. And then verse 5 says, "And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him." All right, so after the seventh time, trumpets are going to be blowing. They're going to be playing their anthems or whatever it is that they're playing, and then when they complete the seventh time around the city on the seventh day, they're going to blow a very long note. And as they blow that long note, all of the people who are the warriors who have been marching around with them are going to shout at the same time. And then it says the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. They're going to go over. The walls are going to be down. They're all going to just go in and conquer. Now, note that for a city-state, walls are defensive. And so a lot of their fighters are going to be up on those walls looking down and watching this take place. So when those walls come down, Jericho's not going to be expecting that. They're going to lose a lot of their soldiers just as the walls collapse. And so the resistance inside isn't going to be very much after that. And so all these warriors are going to be able to go in straight over the walls and go in and conquer the city, and that's exactly what they do. So verse 6, this is Joshua passing on the instruction to everybody else, and he's very meticulous, very careful about it. It says, "And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant. Let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Jehovah. He said unto the people, Pass on and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of Jehovah. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before Jehovah, that is, before the ark, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of Jehovah followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the rearward came after the ark, the priests going on blowing with the trumpets." So they do this. They set it up exactly as God said. Remember when we were reading through after all of the trouble that came with the spies in the book of Numbers, very early on in the book of Numbers, that we read that everything that God commanded Moses did. Everything that God commanded Moses did. Moses constantly was doing all that God had commanded. Well, here Joshua is keeping with that because Joshua has been with Moses this whole time. Joshua sees that every time Moses does all that Jehovah had commanded him, God blessed him. And God blessed the Israelites when they followed through as well. So Joshua is being very meticulous now in saying, hey, do exactly what God said to do. Alright? And then verse 10, Joshua had commanded the people, saying, You shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I bid you shout, then shall you shout. Now this isn't saying that back in camp, after they've done walking around, they can't talk. Obviously Joshua's talking here while they're at the camp and giving us instruction. But as they are marching around, the people, the warriors, are absolutely silent. They don't even speak a word according to Joshua's commandment. And then on the 7th day when they're marching around, they march around 7 times. Can you imagine how imposing that is? The anticipation that is building up now in Jericho, where you have an entire army just marching around outside not saying a word. You only have these trumpets blowing. But you have these thousands upon thousands of men marching around the city once a day, and they don't say a thing. How intimidating is that? And then they do it on the 7th day, they do it 7 times. So the anticipation, oh, something's different. They're not just marching around one time now, they're marching around again and again and again. That anticipation is building, the fear is building, that they're just trembling inside the city as this army marches around 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 7 times, and nobody says a thing. That is, like, I can imagine feeling sick you're so scared of what's coming next because you don't know. You know that this God that has been with Israel coming out of Egypt, you know what he can do. You've heard the stories now for 40 years about what this God has done for this people and to this people when they're disobedient. And now they've just crossed over this river by miraculous means, and now they're at your doorstep, and now they're doing this creepy walk around, silent walk around once a day, 7 days, 7 times, and just whatever. And when that trumpet sounds and that shout finally comes out, I can imagine some of these guys just fainting dead away. All right. So verse 11, so the ark of Jehovah compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of Jehovah. 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Jehovah went on continually, and blew with the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the rearward came after the ark of Jehovah, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the second day they compassed the city once, and returned into the camp. So they did 6 days. It came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day, and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. So it's very clear. Joshua is writing out meticulously that they did everything that God instructed exactly right. Exactly the way that God had commanded them to do. They only compassed it 7 times on the 7th day. In verse 16, and it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, shout, for Jehovah has given you the city. So they blow. Joshua commands them to shout. The city shall be accursed, even it, and all that are therein. To Jehovah only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you in any wise keep for yourselves from the accursed thing, lest you make yourselves accursed, when you take of the accursed thing and make the camp of the Israel accursed and trouble it. So Joshua gives them command. He says, the trumpet's going to sound. You shout when that comes out. Everything is going to be destroyed. Or everyone that is inside is going to be destroyed, except for Rahab and everybody that is in her house with her. And then when you get into the city, destroy all of the accursed items. That is, all of the pagan idols, all of the things that are wicked and evil, that are part of why these people are being destroyed. He says, don't keep any of that, because then you'll turn us into a curse. Remember, this has already happened. This has happened in the book of Numbers, where they were corrupted by the surrounding nations. And Joshua is reminding them of what had happened. He tells them, don't do it. And right now, the Israelites are in a mode where they are listening to everything Joshua says. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Okay? And then he says, but all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto Jehovah, and they shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So anything made out of these precious metals, they're going to be melted down. If they're pagan idols and stuff, they're going to be melted down. And the material is going to be used. Obviously not the pagan idols themselves are not going to be used. But so they march around 7 times. The priests blow with their trumpets, and verse 20 says, so the people shouted when the priests blew with the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and took the city. Now, for the walls to fall down flat, they had to fall outward. And what this shows is the miraculous nature of the falling of these walls, because, if you think about walls falling inward, that means some force is on the outside pushing in, and people can say, well, it was the sound, or it was the shouting, and the walls were weak, and, there's all of these excuses that people will come up to say that it's not a miracle. But the walls falling outward, they fall flat on the ground, so that it's very easy to walk over them. There's no way that there was a force on the inside that would have caused that to happen. And so it's very important that this point be made. That's what Joshua was trying to say here, is that God is the one that caused the walls to fall. Not the trumpets, not the voice, but God is the one that just, the walls fall flat. And it's because the people obeyed. And I want to bring out a point here about New Testament obedient faith. When people hear that I believe that water immersion saves you, they try to make it about the water. They try to say, well, you believe that there's salvation in the material of water. And the answer is no, I don't. I believe that there is salvation to be found by obedience to God. If God had commanded that we eat some boiled eggs to be saved, salvation wouldn't be in the eggs, salvation would be in doing what God said to do. Here, God is showing how obedient faith works. It wasn't the trumpet sound that caused the walls to fall. It wasn't the marching around the city that caused the walls to fall. It wasn't the shouting by the people that caused the walls to fall. It was God that caused the walls to fall. However, the walls would not have fallen if they had not marched around the city the way that God said, if they had not blown the trumpet the way that God had said, if they had not shouted the way that God said. They must have completed all of the things that God said for them to receive the thing that God said he would give them. And if you understand how this works, that God commands us to do things for us to receive the things that he gives us, what does he say to the people of Joshua's time as they're going to Jericho? I have given you this city. What does God give us in our time? I am giving you grace. I am giving you the means to be saved. Here's what you got to do. Here's what you got to do, Joshua, to receive that which I have given you, which is the city of Jericho. Do all of these things. And when they did all of these things, the city was theirs. But not because of things that they did. There was no cause and effect relationship between their marching and their blowing the trumpets and their shouting. The cause and effect relationship was their obedient faith to God, and then God brought down the city walls. In the same way, God will not save us until we hear the gospel, believe it, repent of our sins, confess our faith in Christ before mankind, and are immersed in water into Christ. When we do those things, God saves us. And he will not save us without those things or before those things are all completed. Even though it is in the end God that does the saving, we must comply with the things that God has said to do before he will give us the things that he has said he will give us. And it's very clear here in Joshua chapter 6 that that's what God is saying to do. All right. So verse 21, and they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass with the edge of the sword. So they go in and they kill everything. And a lot of people have problems with this. They see this and he killed Joshua and the men of war went in and they killed all of the children, all of the babies. They killed the pregnant women, and they bring up all of these emotional arguments for why this is bad. When you look at who God is the creator of the universe, and he has the right, as the creator of all that exists, to do with it as he wills. And if the adults in this situation are being wicked, they are worthy of death, whatever else is going on. Could God have just removed them from the planet? Just said they're wicked and then spoke them out of existence? Yes. Why did he have Israel then go in? Because people who have problems with this verse and verses like it tend to be okay with understanding that God is the one that brought the flood. And God wiped out all life except for those 8 people who were on the ark. They will accept that. Some won't, but most of them will. They get that God is creator, he can do what he wants with his creation. The problem that they have is God commanding men, the Israelites, to go in and be the instrument of his judgment. to go in and do the same thing that he did with the flood. God killed babies, God killed pregnant women, all of the emotional stuff. The flood wiped out everybody but 8 people. In whatever context, whatever the worst case scenario you can think of, the most emotional thing you can think of, God took them all out. And he had every right to do that as the creator of the universe. He has the right to come right now and end everybody's life, if that's what he wants. Because he made everything. Here, God is commanding that they go in a time of war and take out everybody who is part of these people. And there's reasons for this. We see this again in Numbers chapter 26, where they go in and they take out everybody to prevent the there being like a remnant to come in and corrupt the Israelite people. Because of, well, I used to be part of this nation, I'm going to go back and start worshiping those gods again, and they cause a problem with Israel. But the real issue here is God showing a complete eradication of a wicked nation and making Israel the instrument of that, so that when we come 1,500 years down the road and Israel, the remnants of Israel, Judah, are the wicked people, God can point to them and say, you had warning that if you acted as these other nations acted, that this same thing was going to happen to you. And that's exactly what happens to the city of Jerusalem. They were wiped out. Their children were killed. Their pregnant women were killed. Everybody was dying as the Romans came in and sacked the city. And it was horrible. And God is trying to show them that sin causes horrible things to happen, and a need for a destruction of an excising, if you will, of a cancer. And so he makes them be the instrument of his judgment in this particular case. And so they go in, they don't even keep, this is very much like what we see in Samuel, they don't keep the ox and the sheep and the ass. They don't keep these animals for use or for sacrifice even. They go in and they kill everything. They eradicate a wicked city-state. And they take it out, and there's nothing left. And God is trying to show them, don't be like this, because this will happen to you. Verse 22, Joshua had said unto the 2 men that had spied out the country, go into the harlot's house and bring out from there the woman and all that she has, as you swear unto her. And the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brethren and all that she had. And they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel. So they brought them out, they kept their word, and they burnt the city with fire and all that was therein, only the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron they put into the treasury of the house of Jehovah. So it's a complete destruction, except for the one person who recognized the power and the reality of Jehovah and did things to help. And she was a harlot. She was a prostitute, which God has some very strong words against that kind of living. But God saves her because she turns to God. And it says in verse 25, and Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive. They call her that all the time, Rahab the harlot. That's what she's remembered as, Rahab the harlot alive. And her father's household and all that she had. And she dwells in Israel even unto this day. Remember, Joshua is writing this book towards the end of his life, towards the end of his campaign. He's not writing it as these things are going on. And so all of that time that they spend conquering and going through, Rahab is allowed to live in the land, in the promised land with her family, even through the time of Joshua, because of her turning to God at this time. Imagine if more people in this promised land who had been wicked had turned to God. What would God wipe them out? Or would he save them like he does Rahab? Because that opportunity is afforded to them. But they don't. They just hide in their cities, terrified, knowing that their destruction is coming, but never turning to God. And there's only a fearful looking forward to that judgment. It says that she dwells in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent in to spy out Jericho. And Joshua adjured them at that time, saying, Cursed be the man before Jehovah that riseth up and builds this city Jericho. He shall lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and in his youngest shall he set up the gates of it. Okay, this curse that Joshua gives is actually fulfilled in 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 34. Jericho is rebuilt, and eventually we'll get to 1 Kings 16:34. We'll talk about that and what actually happened during that time. But this curse is actually carried out during the time of Ahab. Jericho is rebuilt, and the man who builds it, it says that he built the foundation with his in his firstborn, and he built the gate, like the finishing touches, the gate of it, with his youngest. And it does happen, comes about just like Joshua says. What that means and what exactly happens is a matter of discussion for when we get to that point. But this is a curse that Jericho does not get rebuilt for 500 years. There's a 500-year span between what Joshua was talking about and the actual rebuilding of the city. So verse 27, so Jehovah was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. So this, what happens at Jericho, crossing the Jordan River has already got everybody faint of heart. They're terrified. Now to hear what happened at Jericho, to know that this is what Jehovah God can do, can you imagine the anticipation it's going to build with these other people who know that their time is up? How many of them are going to be fleeing the country knowing that this is the Israelites are coming? I wouldn't stay in town. I would, number one, if I heard about Rahab and the harlot, I might consider saying, Jehovah is God. I'm turning my life over to him. What do I need to do? But if I wasn't willing to do that, I at least would be like, I know that God has promised this whole land to the Israelites. I'm out of here. I'm done. I'd pick up my family and I'd be moving, because there's nobody that can stand against Jehovah when he has decided to do a thing. So, Joshua chapter 6, a little bit of a harder chapter. The content is a little bit more difficult. And we have to understand these things in their proper context and understand them from, as best we can, from the perspective of the Almighty Creator as He has revealed them to us. We can't push our own emotions and our own thoughts and our own standards and judgments onto what God is doing. But also there is lessons to be learned here for us as well, in terms of how obedient faith works. And I hope those have come across well. Again, thank you for joining me. I look forward to any questions that you might have. I know there's going to be some challenge on this chapter because of the harshness of the things that had to be done. But I still welcome those. Those questions need to be dealt with. We don't need to hide and run away from them. We need to deal with them straight on, head on. So please ask those questions and we can discuss them. Again, thank you for joining me. My name is Ernie Lawrence Jr., and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation, and we will see you in Joshua chapter 7.